So thank you so much, Uncle Tommy. Those words were so beautiful about my mom and about me. I really appreciate how much how much you care for me and how proud you are. And this was a really difficult time, handling my mom's illness and all of the all the treatments and everything. And I just appreciated all your support through it. So thank you. And thank you to everybody who is here. I see so many faces that I've known, excuse me, so many faces that I have known through the years, and some faces that I don't know. And I'm so pleased that you felt so strongly about my mom that you wanted to come out here today and to honor her. So it means a lot to me. Thank you. So I wrote down some words here, so I'm just going to dive right in and start reading. And I hope you enjoy the stories that I'm going to take you through, the things that I remember about my mom, and perhaps you will fall in love with her the same way that I did. So in my family, education is really important. My grandmother converted to Catholicism so that her kids, who were both really smart, could go to Catholic school where they'd get a better education than their local public school in the Bronx. And it was good for their intellectual development, but Catholic school at that time was not a place that really welcomed questions. And as you know, my mom was a questioner. So time after time, my grandmother got sick of having to leave work to come get my mother after yet another rebellious incident. And even outside of school, Mom was able to get in trouble. She used to talk about Big Sam, a nun who would come, after the Cathedral High girls as they hung out at the local coffee shop with their uniform skirts hiked up, smoking cigarettes, listening to the jukebox in a way that did not conform to the cathedral code of conduct. But even then, Mom was confident and not afraid to get in trouble. One night she told me she snuck out to see Smokey Robinson, which did not go well for her when she got home. But hey, she got to see Smokey Robinson live at the Apollo, so for her it was worth it. And she continues to love Smokey Robinson and lots of other music. She especially loved jazz. We were a jazz family with music always playing. She also loved reading, and she was a member of 3 book clubs. And that was her. She never did anything by half measures. And I hope some of you grabbed the bookmarks that we have back there. Instead of prayer cards, I got bookmarks because we're reading family. So she got very enthusiastic about her interests. And when she got back into quilting, for instance, where a typical person might, buy quilting for dummies and start slow, she jumped right in and in such a gargantuan way and with such enthusiasm that she had a whole room in her apartment that was just for quilting. She joined guilds and she went to quilting shops and made tons of friends in that community who were all incredibly supportive when she was in the ICU and came out and just were really there in droves. And I don't know if that is Ruby, her alter ego, who just is struggling to manage with the changes that are going on. So she might need to come up here with me. Yes. Yeah, I guess she does. Here we go. So I now have a dog. Yes. So my mom had originally learned quilting down south as a child, and when she stayed with her maternal grandmother down in Aiken, South Carolina, they would go on the train. Uncle Tommy and her would go every summer from probably she was about age 5 to 15, so it was during the 40s and 50s. And leaving the Bronx to go down to Jim Crow South was definitely hard, definitely an adjustment. And as I understood it, the train trip took all day, and because it was the Jim Crow South, my grandmother, who wanted to keep them safe and forbade them to get off the train, even to get water. So they brought fried chicken and biscuits to eat, and they had to rely on oranges and other juicy fruits for hydration. My great-grandmother, Julia, took in laundry, and taught Mom the domestic arts like cooking, quilting, and sewing. And she was very strict, but at the time, my mom didn't enjoy quilting. And maybe that was because she had to do it rather than, wanting to do it. But her confidence and rebellious nature got her in trouble with Grandma a lot, especially because Mom hated the way her family was treated because of being Black at that young age. She didn't understand why her grandmother didn't fight her assigned place in the world more. She was outraged when a white male customer called her grandmother Annie, his all-purpose name for all older Black women. Her name was actually Julia. When she protested, her grandmother spanked her, trying to get her to understand that she needed to keep herself safe. And when they went to the movies, Mom and Uncle Tommy had to sit in the balcony because, again, they were Black and that was the seating, and she hated that. And one time when she was 11, she wanted a soda on the way home, so went to sit at the drugstore lunch counter where they refused to serve her. She sat there for 45 minutes while they refused, and ultimately she left. And she got in big trouble when she got home. Again, grandmother spanked her, trying to tamp down on that rebellious spirit. It wasn't just the racial indifferences that were jarring, though. It was also things like her grandmother chopping off a chicken's head for dinner, and Jude and Tommy having to go get the body from under the house once it stopped running around. Or collecting pecans from the yard to shell them in order to make homemade pecan ice cream. So it wasn't, actually they didn't get their first supermarket, a Piggly Wiggly, until she was about 12. So up until then, her family either grew or bartered all their own food, and Tommy tells me he remembers going around with a little red wagon to trade their food with neighbors. And about 10 years ago, she and I went to Aiken to visit, and we were actually able to go inside her grandmother's house. Mom was surprised at how small it seemed in comparison to when she was a child. We drove around slowly so that she could see things like the church she grew up in and the station where she and Tommy would get off the train to meet grandmother. And when we were in Aiken, we actually met a local council member, a Black man, who offered to show us around. It's amazing how much things have changed from what the neighborhood and what the community used to be. So Mom remained a rebel and a fighter. And to the very end, she hated to let go of anything, which is one of the reasons that her work as a lawyer and in labor relations, traditionally white and male fields, was so perfect for her. The MTA, where she worked, was in some ways instrumental in creating the Black middle class in New York, both in terms of labor and management. And she felt it was her job to find the balance between the two. Her work in labor relations was really hard, very sexist and very racist, especially when she started out. And as a Black woman, she was at the vanguard of changing that culture. She was often at the vanguard. She graduated from Rutgers Law School less than a week before I was born. Rutgers had started admitting Black women in the late 1940s, but Mom was part of a group of Black women spurred to apply to law school right after Martin Luther King's assassination in 1968. So my mom graduated from Rutgers Law on June 10th, 1971, and had me less than a week later. And I can't imagine the level of strength and resilience it must have taken to pull that off. And she continued breaking new ground. According to an article that my grandfather clipped from the Amsterdam News in 1974, my mom, an unmarried woman with a 3-year-old, still managed to become only the 3rd Black woman and 5th Black person to work at the Eastern District Office of the United States Attorney. So my mom loved her work. She chose career over relationships, for sure. And I know she was married at least once before a relationship with my father, but during my childhood, she was focused on her career and on raising me, which I know wasn't easy. She knew from the start that she wanted the best education she could give me. And I'm told my father wanted me to go to public school. They were activists and advocates for good public education, and he felt that we must be walking the walk. But Mom was happy to fight for better public education, but she was going to make sure I had the best education available to me in New York City in 1976, which at that time meant Brearley. And I can't thank her enough, because my Brearley people are here deep, and I really appreciate you all for being here for me. But it wasn't easy for her to work as much as she did and to raise a child on her own. And she coordinated college students to pick me up with a school bus and bring me home to a babysitter or to a babysitter's house. And most of the time this worked out, but sometimes, like the time she was on a business trip and I told the bus driver to drop me off at her friend Mary's house, and I don't know why the bus driver listened to me, but it was 4 blocks from where I was supposed to go, and you can imagine the chaos. And I remember her being very busy and trying to fit in a million things. She was always late to pick me up, and I spent a lot of time sitting on steps and stoops waiting for her. And I had a daily relationship with her secretary, especially after I got my own key at age 8 and had to call as soon as I got home. So I would take the bus home with the other Upper West Side kids and then let myself into the apartment and call. And the first time I actually took the public bus by myself, my mom followed me without telling me, at least until I spotted her. She rarely cooked, and we mostly ate takeout, which is to this day why I kind of hate it, though given our many restaurant options in the Upper West Side, I'm sure it contributed to my sophisticated palate. I drove her crazy with the messes I made doing arts and crafts and other projects while I was at home alone. And like the time I decided to make onion rings by filling up her brand new soup pot with oil and putting it on the stove, where you can imagine it caught on fire quite spectacularly while I was chopping onions. I grabbed a bag of flour and put out the fire, and then spent hours cleaning it up, and then lied to her saying that I'd scorched the pot making soup and had forgotten about it, and to which she began to admonish me, about the fire safety, and I was like, no, don't worry, I've learned my lesson. But Mom had lots of lifelong female friends. And on Saturday mornings, she would have these epically long phone calls with them, 3 or 4 hours, with the long curly cord that stretched from the kitchen phone all the way around the house. And on Sundays, she and her friends, Edna, Mary, and Kimberly, would send all of the kids to Riverside Church for Sunday school while they went out for breakfast. And every weekend, it felt like we were always at Macy's. I spent so much time there growing up that it felt like a second home. Mostly I hated it because I got bored watching her try on clothes, but I loved it when she took me to the makeup counter. She loved makeup, and I loved makeup, and I learned how to put it on from her and the women at Macy's. And then I practiced at home, first with her makeup and then my own. So by the time I was 16, I was an expert. And my traditional holiday movie, as a result of those weekends, it's not It's a Wonderful Life, but A Miracle on 34th Street. So Edna, Kimberly, and my mom have been running buddies for as long as I can remember. She met Kimberly at City College, then Edna and she met because they commuted together after their first job. They carried us kids around in African fabric baby wraps. They raised their consciousness together. They were activists together. They partied together. More of that before we were born. And then we all grew up at each other's houses playing and getting to know each other. And every year they continued to have birthday lunches for each of their birthdays. My mom really valued her friendship with these women. So other people tell me that I was her pride and joy, and I mostly believe them. But I know for sure she loved her work, especially being a force in the world at the time when that was nearly impossible for Black women. She hated retiring from the MTA and only did so because of health issues. I was all for it because I looked forward to spending more time with her, and eventually I did get to. She was a huge help on my campaigns. But it turned out she wasn't really ready to retire, and she started working as an arbitrator. She went to Pepperdine, got certified, and then worked on arbitration and mediation for the Board of Education, among other places. She loved that work, even though it was hard and sometimes distressing. And then there was the quilting and the book clubs. She was always reading. And she loved animals, as you can see, and was a sucker for those ASPCA commercials. There were always pets. There was Charlie the Beagle, who followed her home one day when she was in college and then lived with my grandparents. We had a cat named Tibor, his successor Tibora, and also Rags. We had Pepper the dog, and then later had Nellie the chocolate lab. Sammy, my mom's black lab, was the dog with whom she had the strongest bond. He was sweet and gentle and had a great personality. Very easygoing, except about eating, and he was known to have eaten a whole red velvet cake. I thought we had agreed that at a certain point she would not get any more pets, especially not big dogs. So imagine my surprise one day when I came home and found Ruby. So it turns out when it comes to pets, Mom was not interested in my opinion. She wanted Ruby and she got her. It was a bit frustrating because my mom liked everything about having a dog except walking them in bad weather. So I got the exercise benefits rather than her, but she did get affection and companionship from them. So my mom did not go gently into that good night. She loved life. She had a lot she wanted to do, but her body would not cooperate. She fought really hard to the point of coming back from the brink of death last summer. Her doctor was amazed at how long she survived her diagnosis given her physical complications. Even this last weekend, when it became clear she wouldn't recover, we took her off the ventilator, and she breathed on her own longer than anyone expected, determined and willful at the end. So she taught me to fight like hell to the very end, no matter what the situation. I think it was her example of courage and determination that has allowed me to do the things like move halfway across the world, to run for office against big odds, and to put my whole soul behind whatever I decide to do. She leaves a big legacy, a trailblazer who made a real mark on the world. And she leaves me with that determination and that incredible sense of purpose. Thank you for everything, Mom. Thank you.